Genetic engineering manipulates life itself. But what happens when big business sees the profits but not the problems? Mr. Murata, my name is Roger Cook from Central Television. I want to ask you why your company knowingly marketed a polluted product.
I think there's serious living like this.
In the Scottish countryside, the latest in genetic engineering. A four-legged, fleece-covered drug factory. The lady with the horns here is Tracy, the transgenic sheep. She's just a little bit human, which is why she's cost £2 million, as opposed to the £20 she'd have cost if she was an ordinary sheep. But she is no ordinary sheep. She's been genetically manipulated to contain some human genetic material, which enables her to produce milk, from which can be extracted an extremely valuable and previously very expensive drug for the treatment of emphysema. Dr. Ron James says his project is risk-free and that risks elsewhere could be minimized by proper controls.
I think any bits of science can go wrong from time to time, but so can lots of other things go wrong as well. I mean, people get knocked down by motor cars, so one should not be too selective about these things. There are a great many controls in place. The scientists themselves are very careful about what they're doing, and as long as it's properly monitored, then it has a great deal to offer.
But in the scandal we report tonight, the monitoring failed. 50 people are dead and more than 3,000 seriously ill worldwide.
Yeah.
Helen Briskman's quality of life has been reduced almost to zero.
Oh, yeah. And my husband's. I mean, he lost the wife that he married. I mean, I've only been married 4 years. And this isn't exactly what we planned either. It's very scary.
Tonight, we investigate a drug called L-tryptophan. It was given on prescription as an antidepressant and sold, without prescription, as a health food supplement. It's taken almost a year to get to the truth behind the nightmare it caused.
I'm very, very angry that they can do this to people. I mean, they're trifling with life.
After about the second week in the hospital, my doctor came in and he says, "George," he says, "you're dying. And I don't know what I can do for you."
L-tryptophan has been widely used for 20 years. It was only when a Japanese petrochemical firm called Showa Denko decided to move into the market that problems arose.
I had an accident when I was on holiday, and after that I couldn't sleep very well, and I was put on L-tryptophan to help me, the depression, deep depression I had. Instead of making me better, of course, I just got worse.
Janet Kennedy nearly died. Her muscles are now wasting away. Her heart and lungs are irreparably damaged. The drug she'd taken in good faith was poisoned.
It makes me feel angry, very angry, at the drug company. I suppose I'm bitter as well. This should never have been allowed to happen.
How do you think they viewed people like you then?
Guinea pigs. Aye.
In a top security lab, mice rather than guinea pigs. But Mrs. Kennedy's comparison is apt. Unwittingly, she and the mice are genetic engineering guinea pigs in a vast and controversial scientific experiment.
Remember, this is the most powerful technology in history, allowing some individuals, some institutions, to actually rearrange the genetic blueprint of life. Perhaps this is power that's unwarranted, Perhaps there's no individual wise enough to redesign God's creation after millions of years of evolution.
But it's happening nevertheless. Here, a human gene is injected into a fertilized mouse egg. The mutant mouse that results will be used for research into human diseases.
We are on the threshold of a new age that is going to make foods and drugs available in a way that we have never known before. And to destroy or hamper that technology because of fear of the unknown, because of fear of unknown risks or imagined risks, would be as if we would have prevented Columbus from discovering the new world because of fear of falling off the edge.
To the scientists, this creature, part mouse, part man, is a genetically engineered tool to save human life. To the Japanese multinational, genetic engineering was the pathway to big profits by making a popular drug more cheaply than anyone else. One result, 24 hours a day, oxygen has to be pumped into George Richter. His lungs and heart are all but destroyed, but he's too ill to have the necessary transplant.
The lung doctor talked to me and my wife, and he said I wouldn't make it off the operating table for the heart, okay? If they just tried for the lungs, I would be a vegetable, and I would have waste a good set of lungs.
At the factory gates, a proud boast. But Showa Denko, whose main business is petrochemicals, also created the worst disaster to hit genetic engineering so far. And what's more, tried to cover up.
No.
I don't think the public ought to tolerate this company's outlandish and perhaps illegal, certainly unethical behavior. And I know they're way over in Japan, and they may feel that they have some kind of privileged position and that they won't be reached. They will be reached eventually.
Indeed they will. And on the Japanese bullet train, we're traveling south to find out more about the company which made the poisoned drug. We were to discover that Showa Denko had already let mercury from another plant leak into this river and poison the fish. 300 people died. 30 years on, those who survived are still desperately ill. Graphic library film shows the results of eating the toxic fish.
Showa Denko are inhuman. I'm very angry. They have ruined my life.
Years of protests have achieved little, although the company was condemned by the courts for denying obvious responsibility and for going as far as to destroy the suspect plant and all the evidence.
Their immoral behavior makes me very angry. They think only of production targets, not of human lives. They've been responsible for a number of disasters because they put profits first.
30 years on, the company president has authorized the payment of small sums to a minority of victims. Now history is repeating itself. This time, Showa Denko has managed to create a new disease.
Well, I was transferred to Glasgow Royal, and this Professor Lawson came in, and he asked me if I knew what a star I'd been in the medical world. And I said, no. He says, hasn't anyone said anything? I says, no. Oh, he says, it's about the L-tryptophan. He says, I want to know how you came on it and what your symptoms are. So I told him. And he says, well, there's 2 cases in America. And he says, but you're the first in Britain.
In America, there were far more victims because L-tryptophan was also sold as a health food supplement. The effects were catastrophic. The victims' immune systems were being destroyed. but medical researchers couldn't identify the disease responsible.
We, all of us who were involved in the research, were driven not by our own curiosity. The time frame was put upon us by the patients dying. We didn't have the luxury of doing the research in a leisurely way. When you get calls at 8 o'clock at night, at 11 o'clock at night, from physicians in the middle of the country saying, I have a 35-year-old woman who's dying, what should we do? What do? You do the research.
The conclusion amazed and horrified the scientists. The victims were suffering from a new, man-made and incurable disease, which they named EMS.
I think this is just a really nasty, nasty disease. It really does destroy your life. And I am getting worse. And sometimes I can't imagine being any worse than what I am right now. I just can't imagine it. But I am getting worse, and it's scary. I'm not afraid to die. I'm afraid to live like this. That's my biggest fear, is living like this.
EMS, or eosinophilia myalgia syndrome, was still a puzzle. Why had a known drug gone wrong? Because it was produced in a different way. And inside the Showa Denko plant, the process of genetic engineering had unexpectedly created a new and deadly toxin. We weren't allowed inside the plant, but a team of American government experts was. They saw how the firm had genetically altered bacteria and then made the drug not in test tubes, but in huge leaking vats. Showa Denko made a proper investigation almost impossible, but there was still enough worrying evidence for the firm to be branded as unacceptable suppliers.
Well, they certainly were totally careless and had no regard for human health or safety. They didn't have a doctor on their staff. They didn't test the product in humans. They didn't test the tryptophan in animals in a way where you're getting ready to then test it in human beings. They were content to know it was fairly pure, and they closed their eyes to what might be impure or dangerous in the product. So that's a pretty cavalier attitude toward a product that they were selling as a drug.
In Britain, Showa Denko's new L-tryptophan was imported and the powder packaged in Eastbourne.
Tryptophan had been made and sold in the UK for over 12 years without any adverse effect, without any damage to anybody. Now we had something fundamentally different and nobody knew.
Did you know it was genetically engineered?
No, we did not.
Nobody knew because the firm claimed the drug was made by a conventional process. They omitted all mention of genetic engineering, arguably because it's such a controversial technology. Insecticide sprays, already controversial, may soon be replaced by genetically engineered viruses, which do a similar job. Eating the virus will stop caterpillars feeling hungry, and so they starve to death. Tomatoes are genetically manipulated so they stay firm longer and make thicker soup. And new genes can make fish grow to twice their normal size. The high security is to stop the transgenic fish getting into the outside world and upsetting the ecological balance. But some scientists say there's another problem.
The technology is not sufficiently precise at the present time to do exactly what one would like to do. So one has an approach at the present which is a blunderbuss approach, a blunderbuss with a person who is blindfolded, shooting at a target, in which the pellets, the genetic changes, are introduced randomly, places that might be suitable and places that might not be suitable. Because of that, there is a degree of unpredictability about the products that are being produced. And that is a source of concern.
The unpredictable L-tryptophan has, amongst other things, cost Helen Briskman the use of her hands.
Be nice if you could do that by yourself.
Yeah, it'd be great.
It went on sale because health authorities dealing with a drug previously regarded as safe usually accept the maker's own guarantee of purity. However, in this case, they relied upon the doubtful word of Showa Denko.
I contracted what they call EMS now, and it has affected most of my body, I would say. I can't walk. I don't have full range of motion in most of my joints, my knees, my ankles, my toes, hands, elbows, wrists, neck, my mouth. It's really got me.
The L-tryptophan disaster has served to confirm the critics' worst fears about genetic engineering, that an unexpected or uncontrolled mutation would cause havoc. In science fiction films, the monster escapes into the atmosphere. In this case, through lack of care and of regulatory control, the patients voluntarily swallowed it. This bronze and glass office building is the public face of Showa Denko here in Tokyo. And it's a world away from the sprawling, shambling petrochemical complex that makes the company its money. We asked for a formal interview with the company's president, Mr. Murata, but we were given the brush-off by the firm's lawyers via a very expensive public relations consultancy from America. Any discussion of L-tryptophan, it seems, is off limits. But in this small town in Germany, top-secret discussions had begun early on in the saga. The importers here noticed a contaminant in the product and challenged the manufacturers. Showa Denko's internal documents give the game away. Senior executives wrote, "This should be kept confidential to produce a conclusion favorable to the continuation of our business." George Richter survived Vietnam, but he won't survive L-tryptophan.
Well, I'm preparing George's medications. He takes 19 different medications daily.
And it all started with just one pill.
Yes, actually.
What was he taking L-tryptophan for?
He was in Vietnam, and he had nightmares, a lot of nightmares.
Now the nightmare is real.
I just told the nurse that I don't want to be bothering them more, okay? I don't want any pills. I don't want nothing. I want to die.
The company is fighting to stop compensation cases coming to court. For George, it may be too late.
I don't know who to actually pin any blame on. Somebody's responsible somewhere. I just wish I knew who, and I wish I could face that person, because this L-tryptophan is just, it's just destroying my family's life. And this illness has taken away a wonderful person.
Sadly, this was not the first genetically engineered drug to cause unexpected problems. The first was human insulin for diabetics. The medical director of a major supplier at the time admits they put it on the market in a rush.
There were commercial pressures. I think that people were naive rather than malicious. And I think people underestimated the significance of small differences.
But for Merrill Ralphs, those small differences were critical.
Well, I could either, sitting at home, just drift off and then come back again later to consciousness as my insulin dose wore off, or on the day of my serious accident, I drifted into unconsciousness while I was driving. And that meant that the passenger, my elderly mother, age 92, in a car accident was killed. And I was very, very badly injured.
Mrs. Ralphs, here checking her blood sugar level, believes there was an unexpected snag with genetically engineered human insulin. It had failed to give any physical warning of a likely coma, as conventionally made animal insulin had previously done. The former medical director agrees.
The feeling was going in that direction, and by 1982, that was our feeling, that we didn't think it was reasonable to substitute the animal insulin with the human insulin as a direct swap.
But commercial pressures prevailed, and while human insulin is now being safely used, 900 diabetics are taking legal action against the manufacturers. They deny liability. 3 survivors of L-tryptophan poisoning give thanks for their lives. Like most other victims, they're in constant pain. In this case, the official control system failed them. It normally relies, remember, on assurances given by a drug manufacturer. But since Showa Denko had lied, the system couldn't have worked.
Well, you lied to our government here in the United States, first of all, when the government inquired, were you aware of impurities? And they said, no, we weren't. And now we found these documents that show they were. They lied to the German government and the German buyers of their product by saying that they had eliminated one of the impurities in their product by refining it out. And what they had done is made a biotechnical strain change. And they concealed that information from the Germans because they didn't want them to know that this was arising out of mutant changes in the bacteria they were using.
Mr. Murata, my name is Roger Cook from Central Television. I want to ask you why your company knowingly marketed a polluted product. Understand. You do understand. We know you speak English and very good English. In fact, when interviewed through a translator by an American lawyer, the company president even corrected the translator's English grammar. We wanted to know why your company, Showa Denko, marketed a polluted product. Why did you do it? The debate about genetic engineering is vitally important. The next mistake could be worse.
Something genetic escaping. The problem here is that it's a replicator. It multiplies, it gets bigger, you get more and more of it. Like a disease, it spreads. Only very occasionally. But when it spreads, it's going to do something that we don't anticipate. And what's going to happen is that our own technology will certainly bite us in the ankle. And very, very occasionally, it'll get us in the throat.
Come in, Mrs. Kennedy.
Janet Kennedy has been grabbed by the throat.
Because we don't know much about the condition, we really can't tell Mrs. Kennedy what the future holds for her. And in that respect, it's a little frustrating because obviously she wants to know what to expect, and we really can't answer that type of question because of lack of experience.
The government, it seems, is not anxious to join in the debate. We were refused permission to talk to the Committee on Safety of Medicines. That's probably because the controls are inadequate, according to David Blunkett.
It's very clear from the reaction of the Department of Health and those involved that genetic engineering is not subject to the same kind of safeguards that we expect for traditional drugs. And I think it's very important indeed that the Medical Control Agency and the Committee on Safety of Medicines are firstly empowered to actually take those controls and to be able to check and monitor what is happening, not merely to be able to take the checks that have been carried out by the companies themselves, but to vet and to look very closely at the evidence that's presented so that all of us can see quite openly that these safeguards are secured because our future depends on it.
L-tryptophan is now banned, but could this medical disaster be repeated with another drug? The available evidence says it could.
Next week, Roger Cook hunts the neo-Nazis and asks, is there another Hitler on the way?